The Shooting Range. In this episode, pages of history, a pilot with 9 lives, tactical briefing, aviation news, and metal beasts, a heavy medium tank. We'd like to start this episode with another new vehicle introduced by the latest update, the T-26E5, the assault version of the famous M26 Pershing tank. This machine received additional armor to improve its performance, fighting against German Predators. It had passed all the tests and was ready for mass production, but it was too late. The war was over. In War Thunder, however, you can put the Assault Pershing to any test you want. The armament is unchanged, a 90mm gun with elevation angles between -10 and 20 degrees, aided by 2 machine guns, coaxial and turret-mounted. The layout is classic as well. The driver and the machine gunner are in the front, 3 other people in the turret, the engine, and the transmission in the rear. The ammo racks are found in the center of the hull and the left part of the turret. The main difference here is the armor. Almost all vulnerabilities were fixed, except for a small area in the mantlet, the machine gun in the front, and the 100mm lower front plate. It's a very competitive heavy tank that can deflect most rounds at its rank. Its own main rounds are the M82 APCBC. The penetration rate is good enough to hit most targets in the front, and 140 grams of explosives would be more than enough for any enemy crew inside. You might encounter some difficulties only with the thickest armored tanks, like the Henschel King Tiger tanks. That's why we recommended you take a few APCR shots just in case. And for an even more unlikely situation, you might need the M313 smoke shell, like when you need to slip through a dangerous area. Compared to the medium Pershing, this modification is almost 5 tons heavier, but the engine is the same. And since the M26 could never boast a high level of mobility, additional armor makes this modification a truly heavy tank. Fortunately, it can still go fast enough to keep in the second line, providing you stick to the central approach. Basically, it's a typical American tank in almost every aspect. Good reverse, great elevation angles, and a large caliber Browning on the turret. What else do you need? To sum up, the T-26E5 isn't better or worse than its non-assault brother. It's simply meant for a different strategy. The M26 is a bit faster and can push for a more aggressive attack, even flank the enemy in certain cases. The Assault Pershing, on the other hand, would simply not allow you to get into the hottest battles earlier than you should, thus losing the vehicle. It's way better for a calm, balanced tactic, and its heavier armor can help you when you happen to make a mistake and expose yourself. Both Pershing tanks will feel great next to each other in your vehicle set, since they're a perfect couple. Some people just refuse to live a peaceful life. And one of such people was a young farmer from New Zealand, Alan Deere. "Where's my Spitfire? I want to be a pilot." The Royal Air Force was happy to see volunteers, especially once World War II began. This New Zealander had all chances to become part of those pilots in the Battle of Britain that Churchill dedicated his famous speech to. Never was so much owed by so many to so few. But his career wasn't the luckiest one. Or was it? It depends on what you define as luck. In May 1940, Deere encountered his first emergency. His Spitfire's oxygen supply system malfunctioned during a high-altitude patrol mission. When it happens at 8,000, the pilot usually loses consciousness and needs to be revived on the ground. Provided there's someone who can land the plane, that is. For a single-seat fighter, however, it meant certain death. Meanwhile, Deere managed to come back to his senses and make an impossible last-second save, pulling out of a dive dangerously close to the sea surface. The news of this situation quickly spread in the Royal Air Force, and Alan Deere became famous as an exceptionally lucky guy. Little did they know. Later, in the same May of 1940, the month when Deere achieved the rank of a flying ace, an even more incredible thing happened to him. He was chasing a German Dornier 17 and destroyed both of its engines, but received heavy damage himself. A machine gun volley went through his Spitfire's cooling system, forcing him to make an emergency landing, right into the German-occupied part of Belgium. You'd think he was immediately captured? Fat chance. Injured Deere was rescued by British soldiers who accompanied him to Dunkirk, where he hitched a ride during the famous evacuation of the Allied forces. He got back to his squadron a couple of days later, only to find out he'd been regarded as MIA, missing in action. Was that all? Not even close. In June, Alan Deere fought 2 Bf-109s, shot down one and rammed the other, damaging his own fighter heavily. Again. His prop was bent, one aileron was missing, rudder controls were damaged, and worst of all, the engine was dead. The fighter was basically torn apart during an emergency landing, while Deere bruised his knee, got an aspirin from a doctor in the nearest village, and made it back on his own. As soon as on August the 12th his next Spitfire was hit so badly, even an emergency landing wasn't an option. He had a parachute, of course, but the altitude was too low. No time for it to open. Deere risked it anyway, and the chute didn't open. Miraculously, he managed to get away with sprains and scratches. It sounds ridiculous, but in 3 weeks he had to leave his plane at a low altitude again, and he pulled it off successfully the second time too. The weirdest situation happened on the last day of August. Alan Deere's Spitfire got hit by an air raid while preparing for takeoff. A direct hit of a bomb shredded his poor fighter to pieces. The fire lit the skies, but Alan Deere, you guessed it, was unharmed. When they pulled him out, he said, "Those Germans have no notion of decency." Looks like that was the moment when everyone realized that Alan Deere was, in fact, a cat. How else could you explain him having so many lives? He was banned from flying and sent to do some paperwork, allegedly because he needed some rest after so many near-fatal incidents. Deere, however, wanted none of it, and managed to win back his right to fly by May 1941, where he soon demonstrated his invincibility one more time. Then his Spitfire's engine died soon after taking off. The plane was full of fuel, at a low altitude, at a low speed, with landing gear retracted, and the airstrip was already behind. One small spark during the landing could explode the whole machine, but not for Alan. He crashed his plane, and the gasoline did spill out, but never combusted. Alan Deere, a flying ace with at least 22 confirmed victories, continued flying through the entire war. He only retired in 1967 finally having a peaceful life. And when the news of his passing came in 1995, his old fellows and chums were probably perplexed. What about his other 3 lives? The latest update brought along a lot of changes, both big and small, but even the small ones may mean a significant difference. Our intelligence compiled a report on some aviation improvements that the groundbreaking update introduced. We'll start with the new ammo belts for cannons and machine guns. The American Tiger Cat and Lightning planes, modifications J, L, and K, have received updated ammo for their Brownings. One of those new lead mosquitoes is the famous M20, an armor-piercing incendiary tracer bullet that turns everything it hits into flaming debris. It might only be a nice bonus for the F-7F with its battery of 20mm cannons, but for the P-38, it's a noticeable jump in firepower. Moreover, all planes carrying the Soviet NR-30 cannons received later ammo belts too. Nothing but the best here now, HE and AP rounds only. There's also a pure AP ammo belt as well. Enjoy hunting enemy tanks. Speaking of which, what else do we love dearly in assault? Bombs and rockets, of course, especially when you can send them one by one. And that's exactly what the Soviet I-185 fighters can do now with RS and RBS-82 rockets and 100-kilogram bombs. Spending less ordnance means you can hit more targets, right? As you might have noticed, War Thunder is regularly adding new planes with precision munitions. But older ones need some attention too, don't you agree? So pilots of the American F-4E, A-4E, and the French Jaguar A planes can now use guided bombs. Moreover, the French one even received a laser designation pod with a night vision device to help lead those bombs to their targets. And finally, the MiG assault monsters that recently got the Kha-29T missiles can now lock onto the enemy machine right away instead of locking onto a spot on the ground, further increasing their efficiency. Talking about missiles, we have some changes in defenses against AAMs. Infrared homing heads are now much more sensitive to flares, which means pilots of top-ranking aircraft can enjoy longer fights. Earliest AAMs are more susceptible to them than later ones, and we're certain you'll spot the difference. The Soviet MiG-23M and MiG-27M had their countermeasures upgraded too, by the way. The update brought them large caliber chaff and flares with wider spread and higher brightness. We'd like to conclude our report with some happy news for helicopter pilots. Top choppers of all nations received suspended armament sets with guided missiles that require no modification research. Enjoy! Test your new vehicles and upgrades, maybe even dust off some old ones while we answer some of your questions you ask us in the comments. The first question was sent by a player called Crapstar. How can I turn off the jet engine sounds in ground tank battles? Because they're so loud. Hi there. You can change the volume of your vehicle's engine by going to Options, Sound. There's even two separate regulators here. Other player's engine volume and my engine volume. Coin Coin Noodle writes, "Could you do a bit about the Russian Yak-9B? It's a really cool plane." Hi Noodle, we agree that it's cool. That's why we've already talked about it in episode number 251. Check it out. Another question comes from District Null. How do we use effectively countermeasures on MiG-27? They fire upwards, so should I not turn? Hello. No matter where your countermeasures go, you need to maneuver if you want to dodge a missile. The MiG-27 is no exception. Exrestres asks, what could be the best Rank 5 German aircraft? Hi, Exrestres. German Rank 5 has many great planes, and the BR spread is too wide to compare them all directly. If we have to ignore that for a moment, we'd say the best fighter is the MiG-15 Biz, and the best attack aircraft is the G91R3. And the last comment for today was written by Chieftain Boy. Can you review the Vickers Mark III, please? Hey, Chieftain. We can't promise to do that in the upcoming episodes because we still have a lot of new vehicles we'd like to talk about first. But thanks for the idea. We'll definitely do it. And you won't believe it, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. You know what I'm going to say?
Please subscribe and click the bell so you don't...
Yeah, you know. And don't forget to leave a like. Try not to crash all the Spitfires you get. Share your thoughts and comments, and we'll see you with any luck next week.